Hi guys, let's look into what responsibility is. From an etymological point of view, responsibility would mean the ability to respond. It's the combination of the two words, and by that we can assume that it's actually our ability to respond, or our response to whatever it is that's happening around us, or the information around us. So and usually when we use the ilit as a suffix, we do it to receive a more global point of view and meaning for the things that this suffix is attached to. So responsibility is the response to on a global scale and from a global point of view. What would that mean? Now, responsibility is actually our way of responding, the way that the behavior that we've accepted in which to respond to all situations. We're following that behavior in any cases, so that's going to define the way that we respond to everything, and therefore the responsibility itself. But on the more global point of view of responsibility, is accepted that as a definition, it's accepted as a definition that it is taking action regarding the feedback from the environment. What would that mean? So when we do something, there's always a reflection, there's always a reaction, there's always a response, right? So the environment also has a responsibility, an ability to respond. So from that point of view, we're actually constantly working with responsibility. In that sense, it can be, I'd like to refer to it as the full package, because it's the response of the environment helps us understand what our situation is, what our state is, what our behavior is, how we're interpreting things. It's actually the feedback from the environment on the way that we work, think, do, and etc. Everything else. So this is why it's so important, because it's practically the interaction, it's the basis of the interactions that we have. Since our interactions have the respective reflections on everybody, there's different things that may happen, so we have to respond adequately to each one of them. So this is where the idea comes from, and it's a little more interesting than the idea of just holding up to what you've promised and whatnot, and all the scary definitions that we might have heard. And mostly from my experience, responsibility is accepted with something that is very hard to accept, hard to deal with, and practically work with, because it's interpreted or presented in a way that it's supposed to be the godly response that gives answers to everything. Well, it does, but since we react to responsively, I mean, we respond in some way, that response receives its own response, and we have to develop a new response. So it's a constant process, and there's no way of just doing something and standing there. We continue on working, we continue on developing, and the more we do it, the more responsibilities we'll have. And that's the idea of taking up responsibility, or the people that do more have a bigger responsibility. That's practically it. And the responsibility comes from ourselves, right? So this is our way of responding, which is why it's uh, it always comes from us. It's not something that comes from outside, that we receive all the tasks and we suddenly mm, we receive tasks from the outside and suddenly we're very responsible. No, it's actually our decision to start responding to more things around us. If we stop at a given point and neglect it, then we're hacking off the responsibility. Practically, we're not reacting, and that limits the uh, region of responsibility that we're dealing with. Now, the interesting part is that that's not bad. So we can do it. We can not neglect something, but rather attach a different meaning to it, that the response isn't needed or something similar. I haven't really defined it. But the idea is that while we're working, we know what we're interested in, while we're really focused on our work and we're devoted to our work. It's not just like uh, writing something and having a cigar or something. Um, but while focused on our work, we know what we're interested in, what we need, and some things may go past us. So that's kind of what I mean by not responding. So that's one side of it. On the other hand, um, those situations usually mean that they won't have any effect on us or the work that we do, because we practically, if we don't attach a significant meaning to the specific information, event, situation, whatever it is, it practically doesn't have any effect or reflection on the way that we work, except if we are purposely neglecting some information or event or action that we should do in order to further our work, in which case it's we might feel asynchronistic with the environment, and that's the case when we're wrong, right? And but we want to prove ourselves that we're right. So the idea there is that we're always wrong, and always right until proven otherwise. So by ourselves, there's no way to confirm that we're right or wrong. We have to actually work it out, give it to the environment, and let it define it for itself. When we see what the definitions are, we actually see both sides, the positive and the negative side of our work, action, idea, whatever we're expressing and sharing. And that's great and they're practically both are split up into 50-50 always. The one that we focus on it is the one that we see practically, or when we focus on one polarity we see more of the other, but we can transform the other into the one that we're focusing on. What do I mean? If we do something, we have 50% success and 50% fail. So the success is how it was done correctly, how it was accepted and interpreted in the right way, in the way that we meant. So that's a successfully done job. The other 50% where they fail is when we've forgotten to do something, we've failed to express it in the right way, it's interpreted in the wrong way, and practically the information is revolving around the field. 50% is distorted. So we what do we usually want? We want to be successful. So we follow the successful path. But following the successful path, we actually split it up into two, because another action follows, and it becomes 25% negative to 25% a failure, and 25% successful. So we actually have 75% failure and 25% success, because they always split. Everything that we do is 50-50. So everything is individual and unique on its own. That's what I mean. Which means that if we want to be successful, we have to look at the negative side and start looking for ways to adapt it and to use it. Now, while having the 50 successful percent, we know how it is the best way to what the best way is to present something. So we can adapt that to the negative percent, and in the next action, it will turn into 25 successful and 25 failure percent. So in that case, we have 75% success and 25 negative. This is the difference, right? We always have to use the whole potential and look at the whole picture of the of an idea, of an act. Usually it's an idea, because just an act is the only the one split, right? And then following the development of the idea, we actually get the other splits and etc. etc. Now this is how we can actually transform by working with what's happened, the information, the feedback, and respectively, that's our responsibility to work with the information and feedback that's coming back to us. It, because if we're responding to something, it's because something's coming in our direction. So it's something that we did that made us look and see for that reaction from the outside. It's always a closed cycle. And I mean, the more we do, the more things happen. The less we do, the less things happen. But then we're less happy, because we like to interact. Our existence, in specifically in the material world, is to interact and experience the idea of individual being. So why start limiting ourselves? And if everything is energy, which we will explore in another video, then is there anything that can happen to the energy while we're interacting? I mean, energy doesn't disappear, it transforms. So in any case, if something happens, the energy transforms. There's no disappearance, there's no death practically. Now this we will really go in more depth in these in this idea of the fact that everything is energy. So we will have to work on it, and we will the explanation will be better than just everything is energy, right? And it's I've seen it, and accepting it has turned into a cliche. So my responsibility would be to continue and explain this in another video. It probably won't be the next one, because I've got a set plan, but we'll explain it. So the idea is that the more interactions we have, the happier we are. The more definitions, the more opportunities for defining the world around us we have, and the more we do it, the more experience we gain. The more experience we gain, the better we feel in more situations. There will always be something that provokes us, but that's a new experience that will help us in the future. So we're actually, by looking for the interactions, we're helping ourselves live a better life, let's say. So at this point, think about what you think, what your responses are, how you prefer to work, um, what behavior model you prefer to follow. Another important thing is what direction you're working on. We'll focus on the directions as well in another video. So think about that, and look for your preferred way to respond. Now, this is something that I'm advising you to do because through your interactions, you will actually see truthfully if you're honest with yourselves, because you can always lie to yourselves. Um, the idea of interacting and finding the way that you would prefer to respond in a given situation. If something comes up and you don't know how to react, then you are able to gather up that information and make a simple conclusion or equation of how you would like to react and what would you like to make out of all that. So that's again setting making a decision of what you would like to take out of an experience is also setting up or developing a way to respond in a given way. So it is responsibility is an important part of our lives, and neglecting it means that we're actually cutting off our own excitement. If we're not excited, then we're practically dead, but we're actually working uh, here. It's been accepted to work so that you can help someone else develop his ideas, and that's true. I mean, think of how many people are working in corporations and such just to have money and go back and stay in front of the computer or in front of the TV, and that's their life. They practically don't live. They just go go by with and survive, and they're not happy practically. There is no happiness and just staying there and lazying. Think about that. I know it probably might be hard or misunderstood, but start looking for new definitions, ones that work for you, and that way you can actually adapt the ones that you can see in this channel and also find new ones and combine them in a way that they work best for you. Now, the idea is to find the most uh, global one, the most practical one that works for everybody. So, in any case, you will have to check other people's definitions. But this definition is what helps me. I'm sharing it with you in order to help you and come out of the scary part of the definition that's we don't like about responsibility, and the way that we're made into accepting it, because it's usually always in an argument. So think of it as an opportunity to interact in the desired way. I mean, doesn't that sound okay? I think it does, right? And doing that more and more, we help people. When we're honest with ourselves and follow our own passion and direction. So direction and passion aren't the same thing, by the way. I'm just connecting them. We help people to find themselves practically and be more honest with themselves. Think about that. So again, our responses define our reality. This is why the channel is called Key Practical Build, because our practice or the way that we work is key to the build of the world around us, or the construction, the way that the world is built. So the change always comes from within, which is another cliche, but it's true. It's 100% true, which is why it's turned into a cliche. So start working. If you don't, it's your choice, but the option for change is work. Otherwise, you're still staying in the same comfort zone and you're not coming out. You can't experience new things, you can't explore new things if you're, you know, staying in your comfort zone. So think about that, and we'll continue on next time with more information on how you can build up your reality. Bye bye.